I want to talk about my 5 running backs going into the 2023 NFL season that are primed for a breakout season. Now, these are not in order, so don't think I'm putting these in order from best to worst. Like, all of these guys who are listed, I think are going to be stellar running backs this season. And we're starting off with Dalvin Cook's replacement, Alexander Mattison. And I've been waiting hell of years to finally see the opportunity that Alexander Mattison goes in as the RB1 for the Minnesota Vikings. For all of my Madden players out here, you know how much of a beast this dude is in your Madden franchise. But how good is he in real life? He's a monster. This dude, first of all, is 5'11", 215 pounds. He's the tank. Now, he doesn't have the kind of explosiveness or acceleration and agility that Dalvin Cook has, but this dude is a true power back. He's going to run through you. He's going to break a lot of tackles. He's going to put you know what on the ground. I love watching Alexander Mattison play, and a good thing about him is that although he's been Dalvin Cook's backup for the last couple of years, he doesn't have a lot of mileage. You're having somebody that is coming into this year at most having 134 carries in a single season. He also is averaging over 4 yards per attempt, which is also really good. And the fact that he's 215, 5'11", I think that that's going to help the Minnesota Vikings out a lot when they get into those third and short situations or when they get inside the red zone. Dalvin Cook, he's a do-it-all back, but I don't think he has the kind of skill set as a power back that Alexander Mattison possesses. And Alexander Mattison, he's explosive in his own right. He has pretty good acceleration. Now, he isn't going to hit it into top gear. He's not going to go 0 to 100 like Dalvin Cook is able to do, but he is able to hit top speed pretty fast. Now, his top speed isn't as fast as Dalvin Cook's. He doesn't have the speed or acceleration that Dalvin has, but this dude is more powerful. He's somebody that every time he gets the rock, you're going to hear some pass thumping. You're going to hear somebody getting put on their butt. That's why I love Alexander Mattison. That's why he's the first running back on this list for me. If you are somebody who's playing fantasy football, you need to be looking for Alexander Mattison as a late round pickup. I've been getting him in round 6, 7 in my fantasy draft. Now, I've also seen some people take him as early as round 4 or 5. So depending on how deep your league is, you need to go ahead and get your hands on Alexander Mattison whenever you see fit. This is somebody who's going to be a RB1 this year or RB2 at best. I don't think he's one of those players that gets overhyped in the offseason and then you draft him in fantasy football and he does nothing like Cam Akers did last season. I actually believe that Alexander Mattison is going to put up some really great numbers for the Minnesota Vikings this season. And also ask yourself this: if you are somebody who's a little bit skeptical about drafting him on your fantasy squad, who's behind him at running back that's really going to take reps from him? Nobody. And the reason why I think Alexander Mattison is a player that a lot of people need to hop on the bandwagon for as we get closer to the NFL season is because most people are going to realize that the majority of these running back rooms now are committee. So if you are one of those people in fantasy football who like to avoid drafting running backs that have to share reps with other RBs, Alexander Mattison is your guy. Now, next up, we are going to have to go with a guy who I was a big fan of coming out of college, in James Cook. He was drafted in the second round of the 2022 NFL draft by the Bills, coming out of Georgia. He helped lead Georgia to the national championship before they ended up going back-to-back. He's really explosive, has great acceleration. He has great hands catching out of the backfield. And he also runs pretty good routes to be a running back. And he had a pretty promising rookie season for the Buffalo Bills last season. You hope that he can get better with his ball security. But outside of that, I mean, there's nothing that James Cook can't do as a running back. Outside of being the RB that you're going to give goal line carries to or short yardage work to. That's what they got Damian Harris for. James Cook, he can do everything. Catch the ball, really explosive. You're not going to run him 15, 20 times a game up the middle. But it's not like the Buffalo Bills do a lot of running anyway, or at least doing it at a productive level outside of utilizing Josh Allen. When it comes to James Cook, he could finally fix their issue at running back. The problem that the Bills offense has had is that they get too overly dependent on Josh Allen. Devin Singletary is not that great, and it pains me to say that, given the fact that he comes from FAU. But you look at James Cook, this dude is explosive. Every knock that Bills fans had on Devin Singletary, you're going to see the complete opposite when it comes to James Cook. This is somebody who gets it. He's downhill with it. Now, he's not somebody who you really want to give a lot of carries to when it comes to running the football up the middle, but you get him involved on some outside zone or just find a way to get him the ball in space, and this is where he thrives at. And I think that he's a better receiver than what Dalvin Cook is. And Dalvin Cook is not too shabby in the pass catching department himself. And you look at what James Cook's rookie numbers were looking like: 89 carries on 507 rushing yards and 5.7 yards per attempt. Do you know how ridiculous that is? I don't care if you had less than 100 carries. You was averaging 5 yards per attempt, not having a lot of work. That shows how good you are as a running back. When you get limited opportunities and you still have a yards per carry average of over 5, nearly 6, that's impressive. That shows a lot about how good you are, because running backs, if you're a backup RB and you're not seeing a lot of touches and you got a really low yards per carry average, I don't really think that's a good sign. I think running backs that are really effective are the ones that can do a lot of damage, not needing to get 20, 25 touches every single game. James Cook is one of those backs that you get him 15 touches and he's a guy that's probably going to give you 4 receptions for 50 yards receiving, and then he's also going to give you 102 on the ground on like 10 carries. This dude is explosive. This dude has 0 to 100 acceleration. He got a lot of comparisons coming out of Georgia to Alvin Kamara. And if you go and you watch a little bit of his film or just watch some highlights from his rookie season, you will understand why. He's a carbon copy of Alvin Kamara. The Bills can utilize him the same way that the Saints use Alvin Kamara in their offense. Lining him out wide in a slot, utilize him as a mismatch for linebackers, because a lot of linebackers aren't going to be good enough to cover James Cook due to how nuanced he is as a route runner. And plus, he's a Florida boy. Us Florida boys, we're a different breed. You put us in the NFL and we're going to succeed no matter where we're at. Love James Cook, man. Don't sleep on James Cook. I'm surprised at the amount of people who aren't really talking all that much about James Cook. There are people talking about him a little bit more due to the injury to Nyheim Hines, but even if he was healthy, I still think that James Cook was going to get the bulk of the workload in this offense. I think he is the most talented running back that the Buffalo Bills have on their roster. He currently is the only running back they have on their roster at this moment that's good enough to be able to have a significant impact in the passing game. Rashad White coming in as my third running back that will break out this season. Now, unlike James Cook and Alexander Mattison, a lot of people who play fantasy football that are watching this should already be a little bit hip to Rashad White. Now, Rashad White was one of my favorite rookie running backs last season. I was on him heavy when he got drafted by the Bucs. We actually got a video about Rashad White. Go ahead and check it out. One thing about Rashad White is that he isn't the kind of back that Alexander Mattison is, but he is really good in the passing game. As a matter of fact, he is better than any other running back on this list when it comes to what he brings to the passing game department. Very good hands. He was pretty much a safety blanket for Tom Brady last season, and he's pretty much going to be a big factor in the passing offense for the Buccaneers this year, because they're going to have Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask starting for them at quarterback, and those are QBs that are probably going to be checking down to Rashad White pretty often because the offensive line is in a little bit of influx. Now, Rashad White, he may not have the rushing production that James Cook and Alexander Mattison are potentially going to have this year, But I think he's going to do a lot more in the passing game than what Cook and Mattison are going to do. Rachaad White is a better pass catcher than both of those two running backs. And plus, I think that he's a better pass catcher, at least last season he was, than what he was as a true running back. Now, I do like his vision, but the thing that kind of, annoys me about Rachaad White is that I don't really think he's a great running back after contact like Alexander Mattison is. And I think that kind of does hurt him. But outside of that, Rachaad White, he's really explosive. You give him the ball on the outside, he could take it to the house anytime. You also look at the fact that he's going to get a lot of work in the passing game. Even though the Buccaneers offensive line looks really crappy, you should still pick him up on your fantasy football squads just because of the impact he's going to bring when it comes to catching passes and all the numbers that he's going to rack up for you when it comes to receptions, yards in the passing game. I think he's going to be one of the best pass catching backs in the NFL this season, which is why I have him on this list. A lot of people, I don't think, are sleeping on Rachaad White. He had a really good rookie season, 129 carries, averaged 3.7 yards per attempt, and he was doing this with 481 total rushing yards. And you see the yards per carry at 3.7. I think that kind of tells you a little bit of what you need to know about the Buccaneers offensive line situation. Now, the difference is that they are going to be running a new system. They got a new offensive coordinator, and he's going to be running a little bit more outside zone, which is a little bit more something that's suited for Rachaad White's skill set. I don't think Rachaad White is one of those running backs that you give them 10, 15 touches up the middle, and they're going to be able to handle that kind of workload. Same thing with James Cook. I think they have a little bit of a similar running style. They're not those running backs that are going to beat you up when every time you got to come tackle them. They're running backs that I don't really think they do a lot after contact. I think they're running backs that can make you miss in the open field with their elusiveness and their agility and how good they are catching the football out of the backfield, and the fact that they're a running back matched up against a DB, which is kind of a mismatch more times than not, depending on how good they are after contact. But I like Rachaad White, though. I think he's going to bring a lot of value to this Buccaneers offense in the passing game. I think that this is somebody who could have 80, 70 receptions. He also probably is going to have 600, maybe 700 receiving yards. And when it comes to his production in the run game, even though their offensive line isn't going to be that great, the fact that he's the unquestioned RB1 and he doesn't really have anybody behind him that's really going to be able to challenge him, he's going to get a good amount of workload that he's going to be able to be a serviceable starter for you if you pick him up in fantasy football. And I think his rushing numbers are probably going to be like 700, 800-ish. He'll probably have 5, maybe 6 touchdowns at most. I really can't see him getting more than 6 touchdowns because of how bad this offensive line is. So I like Rachaad White. He has pretty good size, and when you look at his size, you think, man, JT, like, you sure this dude isn't really a power back? Like, not really his skill set. He's not running those running backs like Alexander Mattison. You're going to give him the football, he's going to tote that rock up the middle, and he's going to put a lot of defenders on the ass. Like, he's not that kind of running back. He's that kind of running back that you got to give him the ball, let him work in space. So I like that about Rachaad White. Even though Rachaad White, he isn't on a great team, he's not with a great situation, he doesn't have a good offensive line or a good QB, which is a big red flag when it comes to evaluating running backs from a fantasy football standpoint. I think he's going to give you enough production in the passing game, and overall he should be serviceable enough as a running back that he should be able to keep you afloat in your fantasy football leagues if you end up starting him in the flex or as your RB2. Now, overall, when it comes to a real-life football standpoint, this is somebody who probably could be a Pro Bowler for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, outside of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, there's nothing to be excited about when it comes to this offense outside of Rachaad White. Rachaad White, he's going to be one of those players that just has one of those seasons that makes you go, damn, like, he was good, but nobody's talking about him. You want to know why? Because he's going to be playing for the Buccaneers. Rachaad White could have an Austin Eckler kind of season where he has like 15 total yards from scrimmage, including his receiving and rushing numbers. And I think that a large reason why he's going to break out is because of how good he is catching the football out of the backfield, and the fact that you got Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask possibly starting at quarterback, they're probably going to be throwing a lot of checkdowns to him. DeAndre Swift is next. I think a lot of people have kind of written off DeAndre Swift because I've been getting him late in my fantasy football drafts. And in terms of a real life standpoint, DeAndre Swift is really good. Really good. You're looking at a running back that is really good catching the football out of the backfield. He's also a really good runner, really tough. And the thing that has kind of held him back from becoming one of the better running backs in the league has been injuries. He's played 3 seasons for the Detroit Lions prior to getting traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and he can do it all. He averages 4.6 yards per carry. He has 18 total touchdowns up to this point of his career, 156 receptions, and over 1,000 receiving yards to go with over 1,000 career rushing yards. So this is a do-it-all back. He's really powerful. He's not known as a guy who's going to knock you back, but he isn't the easiest guy to bring down. He is pretty physical. You look at his size. He is currently listed at over, hold on, I can't even find where his weight is, man. But I can't look at his official weight because I didn't write it down on my notes. But I do think that DeAndre Swift is pretty big. Let me look it up real quick. DeAndre Swift weight. He is 216 pounds. So, yeah, he's pretty big as I thought. He's 6-something. He's 5'9", 216 pounds. So, I'm not tripping. Yeah, so he is pretty big. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I actually met DeAndre Swift in person at a camp a couple of years back. So, DeAndre Swift is pretty big. I don't think a lot of people know that about DeAndre Swift. It's like you look at him on TV and you're like, man, like, he's more of a pass catching back. Like, no, like DeAndre Swift is a really physical back. Really physical back. I really love his game. And him going to the Philadelphia Eagles, if he can stay healthy behind that offensive line with the talent that's around him, he's going to be better than what Miles Sanders was. Miles Sanders isn't a bad back. He's okay. But DeAndre Swift could potentially be one of the better running backs that we have in the NFL because he truly can do it all. He's a pretty physical back. He also is pretty explosive, so you can run him inside, outside the tackles. He can catch passes out of the backfield. There's really no reason why you should have to take DeAndre Swift off the field, unless that's due to him getting injured. So I love the DeAndre Swift. I think he's going to be in for a breakout season. He hasn't broken out yet because I don't really think he's had a breakout-worthy season, or at least one that you can consider being breakout worthy. But if he can stay healthy for the Philadelphia Eagles this season, I think he could be a Pro Bowler, and he could be one of the more underrated pickups from this past offseason. And lastly, I got Jerome Ford. Now, he's a backup. He's going to be RB2 behind Nick Chubb this year. You may be wondering, JT, why the hell do you have a backup running back on this list? This is a breakout list. This is a list full of guys who are going to break out this year and put the league on notice. And listen, he's a backup, but you got to remember that the Browns run the football a lot. And Kareem Hunt got a good amount of action last season. And I think the reason why they let Kareem Hunt go is because they drafted Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford was always in line to be Kareem Hunt's replacement. From where they drafted him in the 5th round of last year's draft. I don't think too many people expected Jerome Ford to get drafted after round 3. So the Browns getting him in round 5 was a huge steal. This dude has great size, and even though he's a physical back who's known as a bruiser, he's also pretty nifty. He's also pretty shifty for his size. He's 5'11", 220 pounds, and if you watch some of his highlights when he was coming out of Cincinnati, this dude is a monster. Great vision, great acceleration. Now, when he ends up hitting the accelerator and he gets to his top speed, he isn't somebody that's just going to, pull away from defenders. Defenders do catch up to him pretty often. But I do think that he has enough speed that if you give him some open field, he can make you pay. He's not one of those guys that's going to always get hawked in. But I love Jerome Ford. I'm a huge fan of his game. Great vision, very powerful back, great balance. I don't know how this guy got drafted outside of the first 2 rounds of last year's draft, but he's going to be a stud for the Cleveland Browns. And you know that the Cleveland Browns already have an eye for running backs. So I think Jerome Ford is going to have a pretty big season for the Cleveland Browns, even though it's not going to be on the level of some of these other running backs. But I think Jerome Ford is going to be so good this year that some fans are going to be looking at him and they're going to say, man, like, we got some running back issues. We need to go ahead and trade for him. He's Cleveland's backup. So in terms of a fantasy football perspective, for those of you guys wondering, how would I rank these guys? Who should you target first? I would target Alexander Mattison first, just because he's going to get more touchdowns. He's going to get most of the goal line work for the Minnesota Vikings. Then after Alexander Mattison is off the board, I will go after Rachaad White. Now, I know it seemed like I was kind of banking or bagging on Rachaad White a little bit earlier, but I'm telling you guys the truth. I want to give you guys an honest evaluation why I think these players are going to break out. I don't think Rachaad White is going to break out because he's a great running back per se. I think he's going to break out because of what he brings from a pass catching standpoint. And I think with the Buccaneers QB situation, he's somebody that's going to get spam targets on a consistent basis. So make sure you definitely pick up Rachaad White, even though I don't think he's going to have great numbers when it comes to what he does on the ground for the Buccaneers. It's not like he's going to do anything, because who else do they have that's going to take away his goal line carries? You feel me? Who's going to take away legitimate snaps from Rachaad White when he's their most skilled back? Even last year, Leonard Fournette was a better power back than Rachaad White, and he was used in more short yardage situations. But Rachaad White last season, he was so good that it was kind of hard to keep him off the field because he was just so better and brought more to the table than Leonard Fournette. So I think the reason why Rachaad White's production is going to be a little bit down in the run game department isn't more so because he's not a great running back, but simply for the fact that the Buccaneers offensive line isn't going to be that good. It's going to be really shaky. So I think you probably aren't going to get, I don't think you're going to get a lot from him from a ground game perspective. Like I said, I think that a lot of his production is going to come from what he does in the passing game. I think he's somebody who can have 700, 800 receiving yards and give you 600, 700 on the ground, which could give you a season where he has 1,400 total all-purpose yards, similar to Travis Etienne. Like, did you guys watch Travis Etienne with the Jacksonville Jaguars last year? If you did, that's how I think Rachaad White is going to do. Rachaad White is Travis Etienne, but I think less explosive. Great vision, good acceleration, but he doesn't really have breakaway speed. And you know, I just think as a runner, he has a couple of more things he has to improve on with their offensive line. It won't be that great, but from a pass catching standpoint, he might be the second best pass catching back in the league next season based on production, right behind either a guy like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Alvin Kamara, or Austin Eckler. I think he's going to be that good. I think he's going to be a great scat back. I think he's going to be a top 3, top 5 scat back next year in terms of guys who can do everything, running, catching the ball out of the backfield. That's why you should draft Rachaad White in your fantasy football leagues. If you're somebody who's used to running backs that, you know, they get a lot of workload, you know, they're getting it downhill, they're north and south, Alexander Mattison is your guy. But Rachaad White, though, he's going to get a lot of his production in the passing game. James Cook, I think he's going to have more success on the ground than Rachaad White. Now, I don't think he's going to be a 1,000-yard guy. I don't know if he'll get that much work. I don't know if the Bills offense is capable of producing a 1,000-yard running back, but I think he can have 1,000 all-purpose yards as well. I don't think he's going to be utilized as much as Rachaad White in the passing game, simply due to the fact that you got Stephon Diggs, you got what's his name, Gabe Davis out of UCF. You got 2 really good tight ends, Dawson Knox, Darren Kincaid. So I don't really think he's going to have a lot of work in the passing game due to how much weaponry is out there at receiver. And plus, Josh Allen is one of the best QBs in the game, so he's not going to throw as many checkdowns as a guy like Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask may have, which is why I think Rachaad White is going to be better when it comes to a number standpoint, when it comes to pass catching. But overall, James Cook is probably the better running back right now, in my opinion. So I would take him over Rachaad White in terms of a skill set standpoint. Production standpoint, they may be on the same page. I think Rachaad White is probably going to have more touchdowns than James Cook, because James Cook isn't going to have the touchdown workload as a guy like Rachaad White is going to have, because you got Damian Harris there who's going to be the short yardage red zone back. Now, DeAndre Swift, the reason why I would have him under Rachaad White, James Cook, and Alexander Mattison is because you don't know how healthy he's going to be. And plus, the Philadelphia Eagles also signed Rashard Penny, who is somebody who has a really lengthy history of being able to not stay on the field. So we're going to see if Rashard Penny can stay healthy. Now, if Rashard Penny can stay healthy, it kind of puts a little bit of a curveball in things. Because if he stays healthy, then he's probably going to get a little bit of workload. Not as much as DeAndre Swift regardless, but he probably could chip into DeAndre Swift red zone and short yardage carries. And Jerome Ford, I don't really think you should be picking him up if you plan on playing fantasy football. If you want to pick him up just because you're a Browns fan, just to have him as, you know, a backup option in case something happens to Nick Chubb or a handcuff, that's what they call it, then go ahead. But I don't really think Jerome Ford is going to be good enough to draft in a fantasy football standpoint. But from a real life standpoint, I think he may end up being more talented than all these running backs on this list, man. Like, Jerome Ford is really that dude. As a pure running back, he may not be as good as a pass catcher as Rachaad White, DeAndre Swift, or James Cook, but he's a monster, fam. You better go watch some Jerome Ford highlights, bro. I was a big fan of his coming out of Cincinnati. I thought he was the second best running back coming out of that draft class. Honestly, that dude is a beast. They got Kenneth Gainwell there too. Somebody let me know that in the comment section. But I think Kenneth Gainwell is more of a gadget player. He's going to be more somebody that they use on, you know, trick plays. Maybe if they want to get some speed out there. But I think DeAndre Swift is a better overall running back. I think that him and Rashard Penny probably will get the majority of the carries there at running back. But this is it for my 5 running backs that will break out this season. Let me know what you guys think about this list down in the comment section down below.